What's going on, guys? Konami just dropped the biggest ball on us for Time Wizard events, starting with the NAWCQ. So obviously, I wanted to make this video as someone who really enjoys Time Wizard events to talk about what changes are actually going to occur, as well as how it's going to affect these formats. And first and foremost, obviously, I am a H.A.T format channel. I really enjoy H.A.T format and everything that has to do with that. And so I guess the one good side of the news that I'm going to start out with is Konami is officially recognizing H.A.T format as a popular format that people want to play, and as a result, it is going to be a side event at the NAWCQ, as well as it's also saying that moving forward, that those are the three primary formats that are going to be recognized are going to be H.A.T format, Edison, and GOAT. Obviously, before that, it was Edison and GOAT, but now H.A.T format is included in that. So, obviously, it says right here, the first format will be used is going to be April 2014, the Forbidden and Limitless, and the last legal set will be the Realm of Light structure deck. So obviously, as I mentioned, that is going to be H.A.T format, and this is going to be the format that they actually used for the Attack of the Giant public card event, which is very good, and we actually do know what card that's going to be as well, and I think this is really, really cool as it's a very iconic card for H.A.T format, and that is going to be this giant card of H.A.T, which is honestly really, really cool. I would assume if they're doing the smaller giant cards, the medium-sized cards, usually it's the same card, so, we could expect that maybe the, second and third place, if they're doing that, is going to be other H.A.Ts as well, but we will have to see on that. As of right now, we just have that the main card is H.A.T, which again is extremely cool to see. Anyways, though, getting into why you guys should be a little concerned with this is while we are getting that recognized, right here when it says, what are the rules for a Time Wizard tournament new? The first line here says, Time Wizard events use the available cards, Forbidden and Limited list, use the rules regarding the drawing on the first turn, and the dueling field of the selected Time Wizard format. Obviously, if you guys know, this all sounds like something that Time Wizard events usually are going to, incorporate. You would assume that if, say, GOAT format, Edison format, H.A.T format were pre-Master Rule 3, then you're not going to have to worry about pendulum zones or extra monster zones or anything like that. So that is good. The other thing is obviously still being able to draw on the first turn is something that really keeps the identity of, these past formats. So that is still going to be the same thing. Now, where this gets very interesting is the next line, which is somewhat unfortunate, and it says, starting at the NAWCQ, current game mechanics and current card text will be used for Time Wizard events. Now, this is a very big change, obviously, because if you look at something like GOAT format or Edison format or even H.A.T format, there are several cards that are very integral to those decks during those time period that now have current erratas. For example, a lot of those cards were banned at one point and then brought back with an errata. So take, for example, a card like Ring of Destruction. Now, with the new ruling, you would take the damage first and then your opponent, and I believe there's something along the lines of you have to activate it on the opponent's turn or something, or your opponent's life points have to be equal or less than the monster that you're targeting with it, something along those lines. Or take Sangan, for example, where it would add a card and then you wouldn't be able to use the effects of the monster or summon the monster that same turn or something along those lines. Whereas before you could just, add the card and then do whatever right away. So that is a big change. And I'm going to talk about more changes in terms of erratas and things you have to note here in a second. And the other thing is going to be just current game mechanics. So for example, back then, both players could only have one field spell, between the both of them. So there could only be one face-up field spell. But now with the current mechanics, while the game field is going to be the same, both players do have access to a field spell. So for example, if you're a Spellbook player and you activate your tower, and then the opponent goes and activates something like a Mount Sylvania, before the Sylvania being activated is going to destroy the Spellbook tower, whereas now both can be on the field simultaneously, and that is actually a big deal because now instead of, having your own field spell sort of as an out to other opposing field spells, now you're going to have to deal with having an actual out because activating your own isn't going to change that. Another thing to note with, in terms of game mechanics and things like that are going to be just in general certain aspects of, different cards and how they're going to work ruling wise. So besides just cards having different text, if they were errata, the current game mechanics changes several different things. For example, when certain cards can be activated, or for example, chain blocking, whereas certain cards in past formats, take for example H.A.T format, if you were to say activate a Teus, discarding a marksman would mandatory have to be chainlink 1 versus Teus would have to be chainlink 2. Now there is going to be a difference in the chaining system as well, or just in general how, certain cards have been ruled over time. So a lot of different ruling things. For example, if you used to activate Mind Crush, you'd be able to see your opponent's whole hand, versus now with the current mechanic, you don't have to. If that your opponent declares a card and you don't have it, you just say you don't have it, and you don't have to give them that hand knowledge. So that is a very big thing as well, as well as like certain cards when they can activate. So just to give you guys an example, in H.A.T format, Skullmeister is able to activate in the damage step in order to stop the hands, whereas nowadays it can't be activated in that. And just in general, during H.A.T format, monster effects that specifically negated stop the effects directly to the activation of certain cards. So as I mentioned, Skullmeister has to be activated directly to the hands, or something like Photon Strike Bouncer directly to a monster effect. Those would be able to be used in damage step, whereas in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! That's not the case. So that is going to be a big change as well. And so that is something to keep in mind. And here I'll switch over to the screen, another screen, just so we can look at a couple other cards that will be somewhat impacted by this, whether that's going to be rulings or just other cards in general. So for example, here's just a couple quick cards that are going to be affected by this. For example, there's certain interactions with Rivalry and Gozen, and when a card can actually be on the field or attempting to summon. You have Bujingi Turtle that specifically during H.A.T format is able to be used in the damage step, as I mentioned prior, but now in modern cards, you'll see on the text that it says besides the damage step. So Bujin actually does take a bit of a hit because that was a way that you could protect against the hands. You have My Body as a Shield, which can be activated in the damage step now versus prior, so that actually did get a buff. You have Necro Valley that we'll talk about its errata here in a second, and same with Veiler. You have Skullmeister that I've already mentioned. Goyo Guardian is a great example, as now with the errata, it needs a earth monster specifically to summon, versus back in the day it just needs a tuner and a non-tuner. You have cards like Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon that, now its effect is a hard once per turn, versus previously if you could summon it multiple times, you'd be able to use the effect multiple times. You have cards like Raikou and Treeborn Frog to take for other examples. You have cards like, for example, Bryonic for formats like Edison, where now it's a hard once per turn effect. You also have things along the lines of, I'm just trying to think, like Future Fusion, for example, is a good example of a card where you activate, but you don't send the cards until the following turn. So that's like a big change too, especially in Edison that would have something like Heavy Storm, so you could clear that and you won't get the advantage right away. So that is definitely a big change as well. And there is a lot of other cards. Just think about all the erratas throughout time. As I mentioned prior, things like Sangan and things like Ring of Destruction are very big examples of those. And as I mentioned, Goyo and other things like that. But let's actually talk about just a couple of the other things that are both going to affect H.A.T format in terms of like the erratas in a sense, just so you can get a more extreme example of some of the big changes that could happen. So a big example is going to be a card like Effect Veiler. This is the original printing of it, and as you see, it says, let me just go to the beginning. During the opponent's main phase, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard to select one face-up monster your opponent controls, negate the effects of that monster until the end phase. So this is only stopping till the end phase, meaning, there is a way to chain your priority, basically. For example, most common is on Yamato's effect, and if Yamato did have a Veiler on it, it would still be able to use its effect during your end phase. Now, if we go and look at a modern copy of Effect Veiler, it now says during your opponent's main phase quick effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, then target one effect monster your opponent controls, negate the effects of the face-up monster your opponent controls until the end of this turn. So that means that now Yamato would not be able to use its effect, which is kind of a big deal if we're being honest, just because like being able to resolve that effect of Yamato can be very important, and that means that in general as well, Veiler kind of gets a buff in a sense. So that is kind of cool. Another card is going to be Necro Valley. Necro Valley says all Gravekeeper's monsters gain 500 attack and defense. Cards in either player's graveyard cannot be banished. Negate any card effect that would move a card in the graveyard other than itself to a different place. This is the H.A.T format version of Necro Valley. So with this, the big thing is, for example, artifact Gravekeeper artifact, you could play the artifacts in the deck because when they're destroyed on the opponent's turn, they can leave via their own effect and summon themselves back out. And so you had cool synergies and interruptions with that. But now if we look at a modern copy of Necro Valley, it says all Gravekeeper's monsters on the field gain 500 attack and defense. That's the same. But then cards in the graveyard cannot be banished. Again, the same thing. But then here is the big change. Negate any card effect that would move a card in the graveyard to a different place, and then negate any card effect that changes the types or attributes in the graveyard. That's a little less relevant, but in general, the negate any card effect that would move a card in the graveyard to a different place is extremely relevant, because that means now artifacts, even though they're leaving via their own effect, this puts a hard stop to that where they can't even leave via their own effect. And that definitely means that this card can hurt artifacts a lot more. And any deck that was playing Necro Valley plus being able to play the artifacts kind of got a slap on the wrist, and it's extremely unfortunate. Now, I could probably talk about this whole topic for a very long time, but I wanted to make this kind of as brief, as quick as possible, while still making it understandable to you guys. So I want to leave you kind of with my opinion on this. And I would say first and foremost, it is very unfortunate how they are ruling this, simply because it kind of takes away some of the identity of, these past formats, especially specifically going to be the erratas. The change in game mechanics is definitely a big change as well, but I think just in general that with both of these changes, it takes away a bit of, the nostalgia of Time Wizard formats. But at the same time, I wanted to kind of take an idea of, if I was Konami, how am I looking at this? And so the first thing that I'm thinking is, with some of these past formats, with all the different ruling changes and things like that, there are a lot of newer players. Keep in mind, some of these formats are, 10 to 15 plus years old. Like GOAT format is basically 20 years old at this point. And so it can be hard, especially when, people are constantly getting in the game and out of the game and stuff like that. It can be very hard for, newer judges to actually keep up with some of these rulings. And so I could definitely see that being part of the reason why they would kind of switch up on, having everything be the modern rulings in a sense, and the modern card text and things like that, just so that if they continue this throughout the future, then, judges that are newer will be able to just go based on the knowledge they are taught at that time and not have to look back again up to 20 years in order to actually go and learn the rulings and learn all the different texts. Like maybe it's a player is playing with a modern card, but, the opponent is saying, no, it had the old text back then. So that is something to keep in mind. Another thing that I could see coming from this is going to be that, for example, Master Duel starts implementing some past formats into it, and as a result, they wouldn't have to program all of the older formats and stuff like that, and all the rulings in that sort. So maybe they're trying to take advantage of Master Duel and past formats as well, or even maybe coming out with a game that, has the possibility of playing some of these past formats, and it's a lot easier to get it all on track in terms of that. But at the same time, again, it really just takes away from the identity of it, despite it being really good that we're finally getting hat format. Even for these other formats that I mentioned, I do enjoy a lot of retro formats, and for these specifically, I feel like that can really hurt them. Now, the same way that we, made our voice loud enough to eventually get hat format, for example, put onto the notice of Konami, it'll be interesting to see if kind of the outrage from a lot of players who dislike all these changes is going to change as well. Maybe, they could potentially revert it following other, events if this doesn't go as planned. But at the same time, people love past formats and people will probably try to make it work. And as a result, I could see this being, something that Konami implements for the future in general. But it is really, again, very unfortunate. But I do want to hear your guys' opinion. Again, there's so many cards that got changes and different things that I could talk about, but I just wanted to get this video out as quickly as possible so you guys can be made aware of it. But yeah, let me know in the comment section your opinion on this whole change and if that's going to affect your, idea of these past formats at all. The other big thing is going to be moving forward. How does that affect, online play? Are people going to go by what Konami's saying? For example, I do a lot of dueling book replays and, usually we're playing by the 2014 rulings and stuff like that. So are people going to start having conflicts with that whole thing? It really just shakes up a lot of stuff. So I might have to make an update on this moving forward once, the whole community settles down from this big news and we figure something out with that. But let me know your opinion in the comment section. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it, comment any questions or videos you want to see in the future, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to get notified anytime I put a new video out. And anyways, guys, I will see you in the next video.